The rise of technocrats, post-war reconstruction and political influence. The aftermath of World War II heralded an era of extensive post-war reconstruction efforts across war-torn nations, aiming to restore stability, rebuild infrastructure, and revive economies in the wake of devastation. While these initiatives were essential for recovery and progress, they inadvertently paved the way for the emergence of a permanent class of technocrats wielding significant influence beyond the traditional confines of the ballot box. This paper delves into how post-war reconstruction fostered the rise of technocrats who operate independently of democratic oversight. In the exigency of post-war reconstruction, technocrats, individuals possessing specialized technical knowledge and expertise, played pivotal roles in shaping economic policies, urban planning strategies, and social welfare programs. Their instrumental contributions in stabilizing societies and kickstarting recovery mechanisms elevated their status, positioning them as indispensable agents of progress and development. Unlike elected officials, whose tenure is subject to periodic elections and voter approval, technocrats often operate within bureaucratic frameworks and specialized agencies, shielded from the volatility of electoral cycles. Their longevity in roles of influence and decision-making allows them to pursue long-term strategies and agendas that transcend the immediacy of political mandates, potentially leading to policies that prioritize technical efficiency over democratic accountability. The growing prominence of technocrats in post-war reconstruction efforts has raised concerns about democratic deficits and the concentration of power in the hands of an unelected elite. As technocrats navigate complex policy domains and wield substantial influence over critical areas of governance, questions emerge regarding the extent to which their decisions align with the will of the electorate and the principles of democratic governance. The entrenchment of a technocratic class operating beyond the reach of the ballot box introduces challenges in ensuring transparent decision-making processes and mechanisms of accountability. The opacity of technocratic decision-making, coupled with limited channels for public scrutiny and participation, can weaken the foundational pillars of democratic governance and impede avenues for citizen engagement in shaping policy outcomes. Transnational corporations, driven by profit motives and market dynamics, play a pivotal role in directing the flow of international resources, including energy, natural commodities, and financial assets. Through strategic investments, lobbying efforts, and partnerships with state actors, these entities navigate global supply chains and exert control over vital resources, often transcending national boundaries and regulatory frameworks. The reverberations of the 2026 global supply chain crisis have laid bare the vulnerabilities inherent in a world increasingly governed by algorithms and automated systems, rather than human leadership and strategic foresight. This observation scrutinizes how the crisis underscored the fragility of a system reliant on automated decision-making processes, illuminating the critical role of human agency and adaptive governance in navigating complex challenges on a global scale. The 2026 global supply chain crisis, characterized by widespread disruptions in logistics, manufacturing, and transportation networks, exposed the interconnectedness and interdependencies inherent in the modern global economy. As algorithms and automated systems grappled with unprecedented challenges, including labor shortages, geopolitical tensions, and environmental disasters, the limitations of algorithmic governance in responding to dynamic and multifaceted crises came to the forefront. The cascading effects of disruptions along the supply chain, from production delays to inventory shortages and price fluctuations, highlighted the fragility of algorithm-driven systems in mitigating and adapting to unforeseen contingencies. The reliance on predictive models, data analytics, and automated decision-making mechanisms proved insufficient in addressing the complexity and scale of disruptions that transcended conventional parameters and strayed beyond the predictive capabilities of algorithms. Amidst the turmoil of the global supply chain crisis, the indispensable role of human agency, strategic foresight, and adaptive leadership emerged as essential components in navigating turbulent waters and steering systems towards resilience and recovery. While algorithms and automated processes offer efficiency and optimization in routine operations, the crisis underscored the irreplaceable value of human judgment, creative problem-solving, and empathetic decision-making in times of uncertainty and upheaval. The imperative of adaptive governance, characterized by flexibility, responsiveness, and a collaborative approach to decision-making, became evident as leaders grappled with the multifaceted challenges posed by the supply chain crisis. Embracing a multidisciplinary perspective, fostering stakeholder engagement, and integrating diverse expertise proved vital in orchestrating effective responses and charting pathways towards sustainable supply chain resilience in the face of external shocks and disruptions. The aftermath of the 2026 global supply chain crisis serves as a stark reminder of the delicate balance between algorithmic automation and human leadership in governing complex systems and navigating dynamic landscapes. As societies confront the exigencies of an interconnected world, rife with uncertainties and complexities, the imperative lies in harnessing the complementary strengths of algorithms and human agency to foster adaptive governance structures that prioritize resilience, foresight, and collective well-being. The evolution of psychological operations, PESOPs, traces a compelling lineage from the realms of early Cold War propaganda to the intricately crafted precision-targeted narratives that epitomize modern social engineering practices. This exploration delves into the historical trajectory of PSYOPs, illuminating the transformative shifts in strategy, technology, and objectives that have shaped the landscape of influence operations across different eras. During the Cold War era, psychological operations emerged as a strategic tool wielded by competing superpowers to shape perceptions, manipulate ideologies, and influence behavior on a global scale. Propaganda campaigns, disinformation tactics, and media manipulation were employed to sway public opinion, sow discord, and advance strategic agendas in the ideological battleground of the Cold War. The use of psychological operations during the early Cold War era extended beyond mere propaganda to encompass sophisticated forms of psychological warfare and strategic deception. Efforts to demoralize adversaries, bolster friendly alliances, and distort reality through carefully curated narratives laid the groundwork for the strategic application of psychological operations as a force multiplier in the realm of conflict and competition. In the contemporary landscape of social engineering, precision-targeted narratives have emerged as a hallmark of influence operations, leveraging data analytics, artificial intelligence, and algorithmic tools to tailor messages and manipulate perceptions with unprecedented accuracy and reach. The precision targeting of audiences based on granular psychographic profiles allows for the customization of narratives that resonate with individual beliefs, biases, and preferences. Modern social engineering practices encompass a spectrum of techniques that exploit cognitive vulnerabilities, psychological triggers, and behavioral dynamics to shape attitudes, sway opinions, and influence decision-making processes. The fusion of big data analytics, machine learning algorithms, and digital platforms enables the orchestration of sophisticated influence campaigns that blur the boundaries between information, disinformation, and persuasion in the digital domain. The evolution of psychological operations from early Cold War propaganda to modern social engineering epitomizes a continuum of strategic adaptation, technological innovation, and ethical conundrums inherent in the realm of influence and manipulation. As societies grapple with the challenges posed by precision-targeted narratives, algorithmic influence, and information warfare, the imperative lies in fostering critical awareness, ethical discernment, and regulatory frameworks that safeguard the integrity of public discourse and democratic processes. The interplay between truth and fiction often serves as a potent tool for elite bureaucracies to wield influence, maintain order, and perpetuate control through strategies of collective disorientation and apathy. This exploration delves into how the deliberate blurring of boundaries between reality and illusion enables elite structures to shape narratives, manipulate perceptions, and foster a climate of confusion that undermines individual agency and societal resilience. Elite bureaucracies leverage the blurring of truth and fiction to craft narratives that obfuscate reality, distort perceptions, and sow seeds of doubt in the minds of the populace. By manipulating information flows, controlling media platforms, and disseminating conflicting narratives, these structures create a landscape of ambiguity where discerning fact from fiction becomes increasingly challenging, fostering a sense of disorientation and disillusionment among the masses. Gaslighting, a form of psychological manipulation that seeks to distort reality and undermine perceptions of truth, is often employed by elite bureaucracies to instill doubt, confusion, and apathy within society. By casting doubt on verifiable facts, delegitimizing dissenting voices, and eroding trust in objective sources of information, these structures perpetuate a state of collective disorientation that reinforces their authority and suppresses resistance. The orchestration of disorientation and ambiguity enables elite bureaucracies to maintain control and authority by perpetuating a climate of uncertainty and cognitive dissonance. By exploiting the chaos generated through the blurring of truth and fiction, these structures position themselves as arbiters of order and stability, leveraging confusion as a mechanism to suppress dissent, discourage critical inquiry, and perpetuate their dominance over societal narratives. The cultivation of apathy, born out of the relentless assault on truth and the erosion of trust in institutions, serves as a powerful tool for elite bureaucracies to foster compliance and conformity among the populace. By inducing a sense of resignation, helplessness, and desensitization to the distortions of reality, these structures dampen the spirit of resistance, subdue dissenting voices, and engender a passive acceptance of the status quo that fortifies their grip on power. In the dynamic interplay between truth and fiction lies a realm of power and influence, where elite bureaucracies harness disorientation and apathy as instruments of control and dominance. As societies grapple with the challenges posed by manipulative narratives, distorted realities, and eroding trust in institutions, the imperative lies in fostering critical awareness, reclaiming agency, and constructing resilience against the machinations of cognitive exploitation and information manipulation. The recent failures of international mediation in quelling regional conflicts often intersect with a deliberate strategy employed by vested interests to perpetuate instability and discord, maintaining these conflicts in a state of profitable flux. Let's look at the intricate dynamics at play, illuminating how the stagnation and prolongation of regional conflicts serve the strategic objectives of certain actors who benefit from the perpetuation of turmoil and unrest. International mediation efforts, though crafted with noble intentions to resolve regional conflicts and foster peace, frequently encounter roadblocks, setbacks, and failures due to a myriad of factors, including divergent interests, entrenched hostilities, and strategic calculations by key stakeholders. These failures perpetuate a cycle of unresolved tensions, contributing to the perpetuation of conflict dynamics that show no signs of abating. The impasse resulting from international mediation failures often breeds a sense of strategic stagnation, where conflicts remain unresolved, simmering beneath the surface, and perpetually susceptible to flare-ups and escalations. This state of festering instability becomes a fertile ground for certain actors seeking to exploit the chaos and uncertainty endemic to prolonged conflicts for their strategic, political, or economic advantage. Certain vested interests, including state actors, non-state actors, and transnational corporations, perceive the perpetuation of regional conflicts as an opportunity to weaponize instability, leveraging the chaos and uncertainty to advance their strategic agendas and consolidate power. By perpetuating conflict, these actors create conditions conducive to exploitation, resource extraction, arms trafficking, and other activities that thrive in environments of perpetual turmoil. The state of profitable flux inherent in prolonged conflicts enables actors to exploit the natural resources, economic assets, and human capital of conflict zones for personal gain and strategic advantage. The extraction of resources, illicit trade networks, and economic dependencies born out of conflict dynamics fuel a cycle of profiteering and exploitation that thrives on the perpetuation of instability and discord. The emergence of ghost diplomats represents a clandestine yet influential cohort of individuals who, devoid of official titles or formal positions, wield considerable power and influence in shaping the destinies of nations through covert negotiations and high-stakes shadow summits. Ghost diplomats operate at the peripheries of traditional diplomacy, navigating the intricacies of international relations without the formal recognition or legitimacy conferred by official titles or diplomatic mandates. Their ambiguous status affords them the freedom to maneuver discreetly, deftly sidestepping bureaucratic constraints and diplomatic protocols that typify conventional diplomatic engagements. These enigmatic figures leverage informal networks, back channels, and covert channels of communication to engage in discreet negotiations, clandestine meetings, and off-the-record discussions that often elude public scrutiny and official oversight. By operating outside the confines of formal diplomatic structures, ghost diplomats cultivate a veil of secrecy that enables them to exercise influence with subtlety and discretion. These covert meetings serve as crucibles of influence, where the fate of nations hangs in the balance, as these shadowy negotiators navigate the complex interplay of power, interests, and rivalries that define the global geopolitical landscape. Their ability to operate in the shadows grants them a unique vantage point from which to manipulate narratives, exploit vulnerabilities, and navigate the intricate web of international relations with finesse and discretion. Navigating this shadowy landscape demands a keen awareness of the covert maneuvers, strategic machinations, and clandestine alliances that underpin global diplomacy, shedding light on the unseen forces that shape the fate of nations and redefine the contours of geopolitical power in an era marked by opacity, ambiguity, and intrigue. The juxtaposition between televised political debates, marked by theatricality and public scrutiny, and the covert world of backroom handshakes, characterized by secrecy and bypassing legislative oversight, reveals a stark duality in the dynamics of governance and power. This exploration delves into the contrasting realms of public spectacle and behind-the-scenes maneuvering, shedding light on the interplay between performative politics and clandestine deal-making in shaping the political landscape. Televised political debates serve as a stage for politicians to showcase their oratory skills, policy acumen, and charisma in a highly choreographed and scripted manner. Theatricality pervades these debates as candidates engage in verbal sparring, impassioned rhetoric, and strategic posturing aimed at captivating viewers, shaping perceptions, and garnering public support through the artistry of public performance. Political debates, with their live broadcasts and wide viewership, offer a facade of transparency and accountability, providing the electorate with a glimpse into the policy positions, vision, and character of candidates vying for public office. The scrutiny of the public gaze, coupled with media analysis and fact-checking, lends an air of democratic engagement and civic participation to the electoral process, fostering informed decision-making and civic discourse. Behind the facade of televised debates lies the shadowy world of backroom handshakes, where politicians, lobbyists, and power brokers engage in clandestine negotiations, unsanctioned by public scrutiny or institutional oversight. In these covert settings, deal-making unfolds beyond the purview of legislative scrutiny, leveraging personal connections, vested interests, and mutual agreements to broker arrangements that shape policy outcomes and allocate resources with opacity and opacity. Backroom handshakes circumvent the checks and balances of legislative oversight, enabling actors to bypass formal channels of governance, evade public accountability, and influence decision-making in ways that undermine the principles of transparency, integrity, and democratic governance. The opacity of these clandestine dealings erodes trust in institutions, fosters suspicions of cronyism, and subverts the ideals of representative democracy by concentrating power in the hands of a select few who operate in the shadows of political visibility. The interplay between televised political debates and backroom handshakes epitomizes the dual nature of contemporary politics, where the public spectacle of performative politics intersects with the clandestine realities of covert deal-making to shape the course of governance and power. Navigating this dynamic terrain demands a critical awareness of the theatrics and manipulations at play in the public sphere, as well as the opaque dealings and hidden alliances that wield influence behind closed doors, underscoring the imperative of transparency, accountability, and ethical governance in fostering a democracy that upholds the ideals of openness, integrity, and public trust. The digitization of influence has engendered a transformative shift in the dynamics of power, enabling historical power structures to recalibrate their presence and rebrand themselves as purportedly neutral, data-driven platforms that obscure their underlying agendas and entrench their influence in the digital age. This exploration delves into the mechanisms through which traditional power structures have leveraged digitization to mask their historical legacies and project a veneer of objectivity and neutrality, concealing the persistence of entrenched hierarchies and reinforcing their dominance in the realm of information and influence. Historical power structures have harnessed the capabilities of data analytics and algorithmic technologies to curate and disseminate content in a targeted manner that shapes opinions, influences perceptions, and reinforces existing power dynamics under the guise of neutrality and objectivity. By leveraging algorithms that prioritize engagement, optimize reach, and manipulate user behavior, these entities craft narratives that align with their interests while appearing as impartial conduits of information. The digitization of influence has enabled historical power structures to engage in digital surveillance, data mining, and behavioral profiling to enhance their understanding of user preferences, predict behaviors, and tailor content that resonates with specific audiences. By analyzing vast troves of data generated through online interactions, these entities wield insights that inform their decisions, strategies, and messaging, enabling them to exert influence with precision and efficacy, while obfuscating the underlying mechanisms of manipulation at play. Historical power structures have adeptly rebranded themselves as purportedly neutral, data-driven platforms that present themselves as objective arbiters of information, knowledge, and discourse. By cloaking their operations in the language of technology, innovation, and data science, these entities project an image of neutrality and impartiality that belies their historical affiliations, biases, and vested interests, facilitating the normalization of their influence and obscuring the systemic inequalities embedded within their operations. Despite their rebranding efforts, traditional power structures have leveraged the digitization of influence to amplify existing hierarchies, consolidate control over digital ecosystems, and perpetuate inequities in access to information, resources, and opportunities. The transformation of historical power structures into data-driven platforms has afforded them unprecedented avenues for dissemination, manipulation, and surveillance, enabling them to reinforce their dominance in the digital landscape while camouflaging the underlying power asymmetries that underpin their operations. The digitization of influence has ushered in a new era of power dynamics, where historical power structures have reimagined themselves as neutral, data-driven platforms that shape narratives, control information flows, and wield influence with unparalleled precision and scale. Navigating this landscape demands a critical interrogation of the rebranding efforts undertaken by traditional power structures in the digital age, unraveling the complexities of influence, manipulation, and control that underpin their operations, and challenging the narratives of neutrality and objectivity that cloak their enduring legacies of power and privilege. The manipulation of aesthetics in the context of modernity serves as a potent tool for shaping public perceptions, normalizing the abnormal, and acclimatizing individuals to a world that deviates from human-centric values and sensibilities. This deconstruction examines how the aesthetics of modernity are strategically crafted to veil inconsistencies, distort realities, and engender complacency among the public, fostering acceptance of a world that operates at scales and speeds incongruent with the human experience. The aesthetics of modernity often rely on futuristic design elements, sleek interfaces, and technological marvels to create the illusion of progress, efficiency, and advancement. By imbuing spaces, products, and experiences with a veneer of innovation and sophistication, perception managers cultivate an atmosphere of seductive allure that captivates the public imagination, obscuring the underlying complexities, trade-offs, and unintended consequences of technological acceleration and artificial enhancements. Modernity's aesthetics glorify speed, precision, and automation as hallmarks of progress and sophistication, framing efficiency and productivity as virtues to be pursued at all costs. By emphasizing seamless workflows, instant gratification, and frictionless experiences, perception managers construct narratives that valorize technological optimization while downplaying the toll it exacts on human relationships, environment, and well-being, steering public discourse away from critical engagement and introspection. The aesthetics of modernity often exalt monumentalism and grandeur, celebrating towering structures, vast networks, and expansive infrastructures that dwarf human dimensions and overwhelm sensory perceptions. By constructing environments of immense scale and spectacle, perception managers create an aura of awe and insignificance that disorients individuals, numbs empathetic responses, and instills a sense of resignation towards systems and structures that transcend human comprehension and influence. Through the aesthetics of modernity, perception managers cultivate a culture of detachment, disconnection, and desensitization that estranges individuals from their immediate surroundings, relationships, and emotions, fostering an ambivalence towards the impacts of technological developments, ecological degradation, and societal inequalities on human lives and communities. By cultivating an atmosphere of detachment, perception managers perpetuate a sense of apathy and alienation that dampens resistance, critical inquiry, and collective action. The seductive allure of modernity's aesthetics serves as a potent tool for perception management, shaping public perceptions, normalizing inhuman scales, and fostering acquiescence to a world that deviates from human-scale values and sensibilities. Navigating this landscape demands a critical deconstruction of the illusions propagated by modernity's aesthetics, unraveling the contradictions, deceptions, and distortions that underpin perceptions of progress, efficiency, and advancement, and awakening a consciousness that challenges the normalization of a world that no longer resonates with human experiences and aspirations. Surveillance technology operates as a spectral presence that permeates contemporary societies, enforcing behavioral norms and controlling individuals through mechanisms of observation, scrutiny, and discipline without the overt application of physical force. This exploration delves into the role of surveillance technology as a haunting enforcer that insidiously regulates behaviors, shapes identities, and exerts power dynamics in ways that transcend traditional modes of coercion, instilling a pervasive sense of scrutiny and conformity that reverberates through the fabric of social interactions and governance. Surveillance technology embodies the spirit of the panopticon, constituting an invisible gaze that watches over individuals, scrutinizes their actions, and regulates their behaviors through the collection, analysis, and storage of data pertaining to their movements, communications, and interactions. By fostering a state of perpetual visibility and ubiquitous monitoring, surveillance technology engenders a consciousness of being watched, instilling self-discipline, social conformity, and normative compliance in individuals who internalize the presence of an ever-present observer. Surveillance technology facilitates the datafication of identities, reducing complex human experiences, behaviors, and relationships into quantifiable metrics, profiles, and patterns that inform algorithms, decision-making processes, and risk assessments. By encoding identities in data points and predictive models, surveillance technology constructs normative frameworks, behavioral scripts, and social categories that prescribe and proscribe actions, beliefs, and affiliations, steering individuals towards sanctioned forms of conduct and thought within the confines of monitored environments. Surveillance technology functions as a form of technological discipline that conditions behaviors, regulates interactions, and enforces social norms through the threat of scrutiny, detection, and sanction. By promulgating systems of rewards, punishments, and incentives linked to compliance with prescribed norms and behaviors, surveillance technology exerts a disciplinary influence that modulates individual actions, choices, and expressions, subduing dissent, deviance, and resistance through the cultivation of self-regulation and internalized surveillance mechanisms. Surveillance technology wields a subtle form of coercion that compels individuals to align with dominant norms, values, and ideologies by inducing a state of compliance, conformity, and consent through techniques of normalization, persuasion, and normalization. By inscribing behavioral boundaries, ethical frameworks, and cultural expectations into the infrastructures of surveillance, technology configures social milieus that tacitly prescribe modes of conduct and thoughts, enforcing adherence to established norms through the mirage of choice, autonomy, and consent. The advent of predictive diplomacy heralds a new era in which AI models are deployed to forecast, simulate, and preempt dissent before it materializes on the streets, representing a paradigm shift in diplomatic strategies that leverages predictive analytics and preemptive interventions to neutralize opposition, manage risks, and preserve stability. We will illuminate the emergence of predictive diplomacy as a tool for shaping political outcomes, curbing dissent, and maintaining control through technologies that anticipate, model, and counteract expressions of discontent before they escalate into public protests, demonstrations, or upheavals. It harnesses the power of data-driven modeling, predictive analytics, and machine learning algorithms to generate insights, forecasts, and scenarios that anticipate social unrest, political dissent, and civil discontent before they manifest in public spaces. By synthesizing vast troves of data from social media, communication networks, and geopolitical developments, AI models generate simulations that map potential flashpoints, identify emerging grievances, and predict patterns of dissent with a granularity and accuracy that inform preemptive diplomatic strategies and interventions. AI models employed in predictive diplomacy conduct network analyses, sentiment tracking, and social behavior monitoring to discern patterns of influence, identify key nodes of dissent, and forecast trajectories of protest movements, opposition alliances, and anti-government sentiment. By scrutinizing digital footprints, communication patterns, and social interactions, AI models capture the pulse of societal dynamics, identifying nodes of influence, sentiment amplifiers, and potential actors that could galvanize dissent, enabling diplomatic actors to neutralize threats, counter narratives, and forestall protests through targeted interventions and preemptive measures. Predictive diplomacy deploys strategic disinformation campaigns, cognitive interventions, and information warfare tactics to manipulate narratives, shape perceptions, and sow discord among dissenters before they coalesce into cohesive movements or organized protests. By exploiting vulnerabilities, amplifying divisions, and inciting distrust through targeted messaging, AI models facilitate the spread of disinformation, propaganda, and fake news that discredit dissenting voices, fracture opposition networks, and dilute grievances, undermining the coherence and effectiveness of dissent before it accumulates public support or momentum. AI-enabled predictive diplomacy authorizes covert suppression measures, surveillance operations, and preventive policing actions to monitor, deter, and neutralize dissenting actors, activists, and organizers before they mobilize, coordinate, or advocate for oppositional activities. By deploying algorithms that flag potential threats, analyze behavior patterns, and predict dissenting behaviors, diplomatic actors identify and target individuals, groups, and networks deemed as risks to stability, initiating interventions that deter, de-escalate, or eliminate dissenting voices through preemptive arrests, intimidation tactics, or targeted surveillance operations that erode dissenting capacities and disrupt opposition strategies. In a world where the primary function of government revolves around managing the perception of control, the cost of living extends far beyond economic measures, encompassing profound implications for individual freedoms, democratic values, and societal well-being. This evaluation delves into the multifaceted costs of residing in a reality where governance prioritizes the manipulation of perceptions to consolidate power, suppress dissent, and foster compliance, highlighting the toll on human agency, civic engagement, and collective autonomy within a framework that prioritizes control over transparency, coercion over consent, and illusion over truth. In a regime where government prioritizes perception management, dissent is not only stifled, but actively suppressed through mechanisms of censorship, surveillance, and propaganda that obscure truths, limit dissenting voices, and diminish the space for critical inquiry and public debate. The erosion of democratic principles undermines citizen empowerment, civic engagement, and participatory governance, fostering a culture of fear, apathy, and self-censorship that curtails individual liberties, freedoms of expression, and rights to dissent, constraining the ability of citizens to hold government actors accountable and advocate for social change. Governments focused on managing perceptions cultivate an illusion of choice, manufactured consent, and simulated agency that obfuscates power differentials, distorts narratives, and manipulates public opinion to align with official narratives, policies, and agendas. By controlling the flow of information, shaping media representations, and constraining public discourses, governments obscure alternative perspectives, silence dissenting voices, and normalize compliance with narratives that serve the interests of entrenched power structures, diminishing the prospects for authentic dialogue, inclusive decision-making, and participatory governance that uphold democratic norms and values. A government fixated on managing perceptions exerts unprecedented levels of surveillance, control, and scrutiny that encroach upon individual privacy, autonomy, and personal freedoms, creating a society characterized by pervasive monitoring, algorithmic profiling, and data-driven governance that infringe upon fundamental rights, liberties, and dignities of citizens. The erosion of privacy diminishes individual agency, enhances vulnerabilities to exploitation, and impedes opportunities for self-determination, fostering a culture of self-censorship, conformity, and resignation that subverts the foundations of democratic societies predicated on respect for human rights, diversity, and individual freedoms. Living in a world where the government prioritizes perception management exacts a profound psychological toll on individuals, communities, and societies, engendering feelings of alienation, distrust, and disconnection that erode social cohesion, diminish trust in institutions, and exacerbate divisions along ideological, political, and socio-economic fault lines. The perpetual state of uncertainty, manipulation, and insecurity perpetuated by governance strategies that prioritize control incites anxiety, disillusionment, and existential crises that erode mental well-being, social capital, and solidarity, fueling a cycle of societal fragmentation, polarization, and disintegration that erodes the foundations of democratic governance and collective resilience. Within the intricate workings of a manufactured reality, where invisible systems exert control and shape perceptions, cracks emerge that reveal the enduring resilience of individual agency, the capacity for critical reflection, and the potential for resistance against the weight of oppressive structures. These fissures in the facade of manufactured reality serve as portals of possibility, spaces of empowerment, and opportunities for reclaiming autonomy, self-determination, and authentic agency within the interstices of invisible systems that seek to circumscribe, manipulate, and regulate human actions, beliefs, and identities. Individual agency persists in subversive acts of defiance that challenge normative boundaries, disrupt power dynamics, and contest the legitimacy of manufactured realities through modes of resistance, creativity, and dissent. By questioning assumptions, disrupting narratives, and exposing contradictions within the fabric of manufactured realities, individuals carve out spaces of resistance, freedom, and autonomy that contest the seductive allure of conformity and compliance, fostering dissent, diversity, and resilience in the face of invisible systems that seek to control, manipulate, and contain human potentials. Inside the cracks of manufactured reality, counter-narratives and alternative realities emerge as sites of possibility, imagination, and resistance that offer narratives, visions, and pathways that diverge from the official scripts, sanctioned truths, and curated identities propagated by invisible systems of control. By co-creating alternative narratives, subcultures, and communities that challenge dominant paradigms, individuals reclaim agency, reimagine possibilities, and redefine boundaries of possibility, fostering a culture of resistance, plurality, and inclusivity that disrupts the homogenizing forces of manufactured realities and celebrates the diversity, complexity, and multiplicity of human experiences. Individual agency flourishes in spaces of conscious reflection, critical awareness, and informed decision-making that empower individuals to navigate, negotiate, and resist the influences of invisible systems, fostering a sense of agency, autonomy, and self-authorship that transcends the confines of manufactured realities. By cultivating mindfulness, self-reflection, and ethical deliberation, individuals discern their values, question prevailing narratives, and assert their will amidst the noise, distractions, and manipulations of a world beyond understanding, reclaiming agency, integrity, and authenticity in their thoughts, actions, and relationships with the world. In the fissures of manufactured reality, acts of compassion, solidarity, and empowerment emerge as expressions of individual agency that transcend the boundaries of control, oppression, and coercion imposed by invisible systems, fostering connections, relationships, and communities grounded in principles of equity, justice, and mutual aid. By extending kindness, solidarity, and support to others, individuals forge bonds of trust, reciprocity, and shared humanity that defy the divisive logics, dehumanizing narratives, and individualizing tendencies of manufactured realities, creating spaces of care, compassion, and empowerment that honor the dignity, worth, and agency of all individuals. By embracing the shadows, embracing collective responsibility, and illuminating pathways toward ethical diplomacy, we can transcend the specter of power and usher in a new era of relations, founded on principles of mutual respect, understanding, and shared humanity that honor the evanescent nature of ghostly designs and illuminate possibilities for a more just, inclusive, and peaceful world for all individuals within the complex, interconnected web of global affairs.